Welcome to the post-NBA trade deadline Just Basketball show. I'm Chris Manning. That man over there is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, subscribe or follow us on your podcast platform of choice. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on TikTok. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. All those great places. Also, want to shout out our friends at Prize Picks. Check out, use the code JustGridiron, get a little bonus over there if you want to go try out Prize Picks today. All you're doing is picking against some projections on over-unders. Go try them out. Support the Just Sports family with the promo code JustGridiron. Brendon, big active NBA trade deadline. Every team but two made a trade. Maybe the Cleveland Cavaliers and Chicago Bulls just value second-round picks more than everyone else seems to. There's only one place to start, though, and that is with Kevin Durant. That's right, Slim Reaper, the god, the NBA's best poster in terms of using Twitter, is going to the Phoenix Suns in a mammoth trade with picks out the wazoo and Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges going to Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Nets, RIP, the greatest team that never really was, is over officially. Congratulations to Ben Simmons, I guess, for having his own franchise. Lord knows what comes next in Brooklyn. But holy crap, Brendon. Kevin Durant is a Phoenix Sun. And I want to peel back a little bit of a layer for the listeners here. I was up after Cavs Pistons, a basketball game that I don't remember anything about a day later. That was a worthwhile, not exactly a great use of my time. I was getting ready to go to bed. I checked Twitter. See the Woj bomb coming up. Trade happens. Start reading about it. It gets to bed much later. I text you. You don't respond. And I'm like, oh, Brendon's probably seeing this. He's doing Locked On Suns. He's taking some notes. He's doing his diligence. And so
none
you
of
were
it was
asleep.
happening.
You didn't find out till the next day. So weird stuff. Weird stuff from you, Brendon.
Woke up at 6:30 in the morning, my time. 7.5 hours after the trade had happened. And I had several texts from you. I had multiple texts from, I want to say, like at least 10 people. For some reason, like, you know how that half awake state when you just wake up and you end up clicking things in your phone, like you'll sometimes put the alarm on sleep when you don't mean to. You're liable to do any number of things. I see the first text I see is my Uncle Jeremy. So shout out to my Uncle Jeremy. Who I haven't talked to like since Thanksgiving. And he was like, how do you like the trade? That was really the way that I found out about this deal. I'm glad, great, but it was a very bizarre few minutes. And then, yes, Kevin Durant comes to the Phoenix Suns. And look, I mean, there's so many tangents and tentacles of this thing, but I think the bottom line is superstar players who ask out end up where they want to be without fail. You know, this to me was inevitable from the minute that Chris Haynes tweeted last June, right before free agency hit, that Kevin Durant had one team and one team only on his list, and it was the Suns. And I was a little surprised both teams wanted to do this in season. But if you read Jake Fisher, you listen to Shams Charania, these insiders have had it since the trade happened late last night that these guys, the Suns and Durant and the Nets front office, they've known this was still a possibility. It never was really ever closed off. And Durant seemed to leave open the possibility, and if he wanted to move again, it was always going to be Phoenix from what you've seen since. And apparently the Nets basically committed to him last summer when they put out their handy double logoed statement with the boardroom logo and the Nets logo and told us he wasn't getting moved last September. The Nets had committed back then, hey, if you don't want to be here, if something breaks wrong this season, and in this case it was Kyrie, going off the rails and asking to leave again.
Being Kyrie Irving is what you're saying.
Being Kyrie Irving, then we'll do it. And they did. And it was very quiet. I think I actually also texted you yesterday, though, Chris, when Bill Simmons said, like, the sources are sourcing or something like that, and said KD to the Suns. And I actually think I was probably right then. I think that this was kind of starting to burble yesterday. Nothing really happened. We'll talk about the Lakers stuff. That was really the only big move post-Kyrie before the deadline itself, which we'll get to a lot of those deals as well. But it happened, and they made it happen. And the Suns, with their new $4 billion purchase, new owner, went out and really ponied up to probably. I mean, we could hit on this. Is this the favorite in the West now to win the championship? Did this deal do what they probably wanted it to do, which is catapult them to the top of their conference?
That is the right place to go here. Let's not beat around that bush. Brendon, for me, there are two teams that I think are contenders in the West now that I have above the others. It is the Phoenix Suns and it is the Denver Nuggets. We'll see exactly what the Suns' rotation looks like. It is different now. This team is going to play a little bit differently when you don't have Mikal Bridges, when you don't have Cam Johnson, but you got Kevin Durant, so worth it, right? That is worth it. But there are two teams right now that I think you look at and say these are the two best teams that have the best chance of making the finals out of the West and the best chance of winning the title. It is Phoenix and it is Denver for me. The KD trade, to me, puts Phoenix back up there. Now, Chris Paul is now one of the most important players in the NBA over the next several months because he has to be healthy. And if Chris Paul is not a really good version of Chris Paul, then things are going to get a little dicey. But Kevin Durant plus Devin Booker plus Monty Williams, who's a great coach, plus I think enough role players, and keeping DeAndre Ayton, who didn't go in this trade, probably due to some cap rules, I think makes Phoenix one of the best two teams in the West.
The way I broke it down is Denver and Phoenix are alone in tier one. I think some of that's just like deference and trust in the fact that Denver, you can't just put a makeshift team, which despite the talent you just listed off is still sort of what the Suns are. You can't just throw them at the very top without question. So I think you got to at least put the Nuggets have been great all year. They should be there. Tier 2, I have the Clippers, Grizzlies, and Mavs. Tier 3, I have the Pelicans and Kings. And I'm not really sure if either one of those teams are contenders for very different reasons, but a lot of questions for both. And then the wild card is Golden State, who we will talk about later, I think, as well. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I break it down. And we can get into what the Suns roster looks like if you want to. I thought they would make at least one more move. They end up only adding Darius Baisley, which was a little bit of a strange one in my opinion, for what I thought they would need. But I think this situation for Durant is going to be a massive upgrade, is kind of the next place that I go. Part of the reason I'm so optimistic, right? No Westbrook or Draymond to kind of ruffle feathers and instigate. I just think KD is such a mellow, go to work and chill out type of person, aka a stoner. I mean, we can throw that in there too, right? Helps. No Kyrie either to just detonate everything. No Harden to kind of be distant and weird and whatever. You just have guys who I think see this stuff the same way he does, from Booker to Chris Paul to Monty Williams, which is we're going to work super hard. We're going to get this thing figured out. We're going to win. But also, let's not take it too seriously, right? And I think that will be a good balance for him. And I don't see a player outside of Ayton, which is a question mark considering his inconsistent commitment and up and down play. I just think Durant will be at peace. It makes total sense to me why he wanted to be with the Suns, and I just think that has to be factored in too, because this is such a theoretical team. This is a makeshift approach to building out a championship roster to do it 2.5 months before the playoffs start. But I like it for that reason. The talent is one, the chemistry and just cohesiveness of the personalities is another, because that seems to have been the problem with all these KD landing spots over the past few years.
Well, and I think on top of that, if there's any pantheon, all-time, historically great player that I think you could do some of this stuff with midseason and bring him into a new situation, it's Kevin Durant. We talked about this just the other day. Kevin Durant, one of the beauties to me of him, one of the things that makes him so special is that he is so flexible in what he can do and what you can ask him to be. There are times where obviously just let him cook, let him be KD, let him just own the world. And you're gonna get some of that, but he can slide into different situations and just be the world's greatest spot up guy in an off ball guy in certain possessions. That adds just a whole other layer to the teams now have to worry about. Brendon, the first thing that I went to when I started taking notes for the show and writing stuff down was the Suns will run that little action where Booker gets the ball at the top of the key and he gets a big screen for him. If KD's the first shooter off of that, Like, you know how much more room that creates for Booker to drive to the strong side and like work around a pick and get to mid ranges, get to the rim, get fouls. Like, think about how much room that simple action is going to create for them late in games. Or you can do the opposite. Have Booker as the spot up guy. Have KD run some pick and rolls with them. Like, you can do all kinds of stuff because of what KD can do and how flexible he is. I also we have seen teams remake themselves around certain guys, right? Like the Houston Rockets in the Harden era were made around what Harden was. Every LeBron team in recent years, specifically I think the end of the Cavs run, like got remade around him. Like the 2018 team gets blown up and refigured to be around LeBron. But this is like the opposite of all of those. It is a guy going to a new place, to a new coach. And like, I don't really have any doubts that it will work. We both were like, this is a team that can make the finals. This is a team that could win a championship this year and made this seismic of a trade. That speaks to, I think, what KD is more than anything else.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? I mean, we've seen it like Carmelo Anthony, some of these guys that have gotten thrown into new situations. You usually see that as, okay, you get it done now to have the leverage. You give yourself an off season to tinker with the edges. The Suns don't really have the luxury of that waiting period, and I think that's part of the reason that it is such an interesting moment in time for them, an interesting inflection point to do it now instead of waiting for the summer. Because there is a case to be made, right? That they could have looked at the West, and we talked about this so much. We did a breakdown of the West. We've talked about the trade deadline a ton on this show, and I think we were in agreement. Like, it could go either way. These teams could think, let's stand pat, because who knows? We could be the ones to do it. We ended up seeing the opposite. A lot of the movement in this trade deadline day was the Western Conference, and the Suns being the top of that, they obviously wanted to go out and seize that moment. They could have felt like, well, who knows? We could probably win it this year. We'll see. They upgraded their chances considerably with this, but it's probably true to say that, right? That the flexibility of Durant, the fact that he is so malleable, and I think the offensive fit that you just listed off it's going to be seamless. I really do think that. Like, you know, it's weird to compare it to the Warriors thing because just nothing is going to compare to the flexibility that Curry already has. I do think Booker is a player who wants to have the ball in his hands more than Steph Curry. Like, I'm not going to, exaggerate that. But I feel like as much as there's that offensive fit, I mean, you think Mikal Bridges, if anybody's been paying attention, has been breaking out in a really big way the past month, 2 months. He's been scoring. He's had like 5 or 6 games in a row with 20-plus points. Sad to see him go from Phoenix for that reason, but you just slide Durant in to what you just described as maybe the ball handler in some of those sets, or you put Durant into some of the off ball. Like the flexibility and interchangeability is going to be off the charts. I have no worries about the offense. Defensively, I'm actually like just as intrigued.
Oh, okay. This is a great point because Kevin Durant, before he got hurt, was having an all defense level season.
Yeah. Yeah, I have it right here. So Durant in dunks and threes, their estimated plus minus stat. Defensively, I want to read you, so he was at plus 1.8, 92nd percentile in the NBA this year. I want to read you some of the names that were in the same general stratosphere as he was in that statistic. Dorian Finney-Smith, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Rudy Gobert, Kawhi Leonard, Dylan Brooks, Isaac Okoro, Jaden McDaniels, these guys who we think of as stoppers, Joel Embiid, like these people, DeAnthony Melton, who we think of as being, okay, they're the defensive specialists on their team. Kevin Durant was statistically just as good as them defensively, and he's maybe the best scorer in the NBA in terms of just getting a bucket on a possession-by-possession basis. I think he's the best four-man that DeAndre Ayton has ever played with defensively in terms of another big defensive difference maker. DeAndre Ayton, this team has played small. They had Jay Crowder, 6'6" Jay Crowder as their starting four in past seasons. So I think we're in full agreement that this fit is going to work and that they are catapulting themselves to a much higher ceiling and probably higher floor than they ever would have had with their previous roster. I think we should talk about the package, though, Chris, too. Did you think the Suns would have to give up as much as they did to get him? Were you surprised when that Woj bomb hit? Did you gasp at all about 4 first-round picks unprotected, 3 good players, and a swap to get him?
No, it's Kevin Durant under multiple years of team control. He's Kevin Durant. There's
Yeah.
no reason to think that he is yes, he's past 30. But I don't have reasons to think that he's suddenly just going to decline. Like, I think he's going to be good for the duration of this contract. There's no reason to think he's not going to be. Brendon, what I honestly found most interesting, and this maybe speaks to just where this player is at in terms of how teams view him right now, I wonder if there's another world where Ben Simmons could have gone to a third team and DeAndre Ayton goes to Brooklyn instead, and the Suns go a different direction at center. And
I don't think the Nets have wanted Ayton. Like I just think, and that speaks to a bigger thing about Ayton. I think
that
the Nets
that will
they
be
made
the thing
that
you
clear
try
from
to
the jump.
Yeah, and that becomes the guy in the summer that you try to say, like, hey, does someone want this guy? Can we turn him into a center and like another rotation player and
or another point guard, which is another conversation, right?
Yes.
I mean, they might flip Ayton for a future replacement for Chris Paul because he's not guaranteed. That speaks to why this was such they kind of had to jump on it now,
Mm-hmm. And I think it speaks to a little bit about even if they didn't want him, like, it didn't feel like the Ben Simmons option of like him going to team 3 and Ayton going there was ever really on the table. And I think that has to reflect someone on where Ben Simmons is at and what Ben Simmons' value is around the league right now that no one wants to touch what he's been. And he's been
negative
awful.
value.
Awfully sure. Owed lots of money. There's nothing redeeming about him. I think we should talk about the Nets a little bit later in relation to some of these teams in the East. I kind of want to save some of where they're at and what they maybe didn't do after this trade. Or maybe we can get to now, but I want to ask you one kind of last thing about the Suns. Durant obviously will not play until I think after the All-Star break. We know that. So his debut is going to take a little bit. You would know this better than me as the guy who covers this team day in and day out is in Phoenix. What do you think the best 5 will be for Phoenix with Durant in tow?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you have 4 locked in, right? It's Bridges. I'm looking at the package. It's Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, and then you're looking at who's the 5th guy, right? I think right now it's going to be Torrey Craig. I just think they don't necessarily have a much better option. He is somebody who I think Suns fans expected to not even be on this team after this trade deadline, but nevertheless, here he is. He started most of the season. He's a very inconsistent shooter. He's not an amazing athletic one-on-one defender, but there he is. You have some other options, Landry Shamet, Damian Lee. I think it could be interchangeable. I think that there could be nights where it's one thing, nights where it's another. This is why, though, that Suns fans were so nervous about dealing Bridges and why the Nets not wanting Ayton was such a big part of how this ended up unfolding. If you read what Adrian Wojnarowski wrote, if you read even last summer what the sticking points were, the reason this didn't get done last summer is the Suns were never wanting to get rid of Mikal Bridges. He is on an amazing contract. He is a borderline, like that tier right below all-star. We talked all deadline about OG Anunoby, right? Mikal Bridges is a more valuable player than that, and we heard how high the price was for OG Anunoby. That's why, right? Bridges would have been that 4th guy, and then you find a 5, which is much easier to do. So, I don't know. Maybe it's a buyout guy, somebody like Danny Green. I think it could be that too. But we'll see. I think there will be a lot of players on the buyout market, and we'll have to see. I actually have one to broaden this out a little bit because I think with another mega trade, Chris, now in the books here, we saw the Rudy Gobert thing, which I think also is a part of why KD didn't end up getting moved last year because Gobert just kind of broke the market. Really, Tim Connolly broke the market as the guy who did the Gobert deal from the Minnesota standpoint. DeJounte Murray, Donovan Mitchell, which you've covered extensively in Cleveland. I'm very curious about what the future of this is. I think right now, the NBA is a trade and extensions league, and I think I texted you this yesterday.
You did. I've been thinking about this ever since you texted it to me and thinking about it in relation to what European soccer is, which I'll make that comparison when it comes back to me.
Teams know right now that cap space, like post-LeBron decision, whatever player empowerment era, I think that's kind of outdated because it's not going anywhere. Calling it an era feels a little silly because it's just what it is now. But for most markets, like building sustainable, like amazing teams, if you want to be a championship contender, you got to go through the draft. You got to find and develop the talent that way. You hope one of those guys becomes a superstar. Otherwise, you probably are going to have to trade multiple sub-superstar players that you draft and develop to get a superstar. I think in big markets, it's a little bit different. Like the Lakers, the Knicks, the Nets, the Clippers, maybe they don't have the same exact balance to strike. But if you just go through some of the teams that we've seen make these deals in the past couple of years now, Suns, Cavs, Hawks, Mavs, these are all, like, I don't want to say small market, but not major market teams that drafted and developed talent and then cashed it in. And that's what this is now. And I think the other part of why this all is working the way that it is where are we with Gobert? Where did we just see the Nets go? The reason the mega trade era, if we want to call it that, I think is here to stay, at least for now. I'm not smart enough to guess what's coming next, Chris, but I think it's here to stay because you can solve one mistaken mega trade by making another mega trade, right? Where are we already with Minnesota? Oh, trade Towns. Get your draft picks back and rebuild around Anthony Edwards. What was it with the Nets? Okay, get rid of Harden, you get some picks, get rid of Durant, and you're back to basically even with your draft picks, which we're going to talk about with Brooklyn, like you said, later. They're basically back to square one, and they have a lot to build from. We just saw this with the Jazz, right? So it's kind of funny to me how it's just that cycle is just eating itself. We're just going to see more of these because the people who already made them got to fix it.
I think you are right that the free agency thing is a little. I'm curious to see who the next star who actively tests free agency will be, in what the new CBA has an impact on that. The analogy to Durant will be are they going to just sign the extension and get the guarantee money? I think that is kind of the precedent, or is someone going to actually wait out into free agency? And it's going to be a guy going into the third contract, so you're thinking Luka when he gets to his third contract could be that kind of player.
What's the incentive to test free agency, right? Because you can just get a super max or whatever, and then demand to go where you want to go. Exactly, zero. Our YouTube audience is not seeing your goggles, but it's zero.
No, it's I'm 0 and double 0.
Or our audio audience is not seeing it. Yeah, it's zero. Yes. They have no zero. Yeah. They have no incentive to do that. They could just demand to go wherever they want to go.
Yeah, and teams will pay up, and that's where I think this is analogous to what happens in European soccer. It is it is transfer fees. Picks are transfer fees. That's what they are. You're sacrificing lots of useful capital. In soccer, it's actual money, but here it is draft picks, and you're saying, okay, I will get the player that I want, and you have to negotiate. Don't let's not mistake this. There's absolutely backroom chatting about this. There's no way these are just done just without any player knowledge or consent. There's no way Durant is a Phoenix Sun if he's not signing off on it. I just don't believe that to be the case. I don't have the receipt in front of me, but there's no way that Kevin Durant is going to Phoenix without being cool with it. This is the era we're in, and I think this just seems like what the normal is. And I wonder if the prices maybe settle down a little bit. I don't know what any player is worth anymore. Durant makes sense to me, but the next guy who asks out, I don't know what that player is going to go for. You can argue that only one of the three teams coming out of the summer is super happy with how those big trades went. That's the Cavs. You could argue the Hawks are a little underwhelmed by what the season has been. I think you could definitely look at the Wolves and say this hasn't gone perfectly. Maybe not all Gobert's fault, but he hasn't been as good as you would have hoped considering how much you give up for him. These things carry risk, and I wonder if teams start dialing back the picks a little bit and go different routes in that way. And Durant is kind of maybe the exception to that because he is this guy who's going to be one of the 10 best players that has ever played basketball when he retires. He's one of the best scorers ever. And he makes the team a legit title contender. There are very few players that actually can do that. The next player, the really good player who gets traded or wants out of whatever situation he is in, is probably not going to necessarily just tilt the title race in the same way Kevin Durant did.
Yeah, there's levels to it, right? Because like you said, I mean, the price tag might have been similar for Gobert and KD, but no one was even, no one would have mistaken that Rudy Gobert was going to just turn the Minnesota Timberwolves into a title contender overnight. Even Tim Connolly, who I just criticized, even he's not going to come out and say that, right? That was a little bit of that's part of why it got panned so much. But yeah, I mean, to keep your comparison going with the European soccer stuff, it's if the picks are the transfer fees, then exactly to return to kind of why I think we are the way we are. It's well, you're gonna sell the next player who comes along and replenish the picks you lost, right? You're going to trade Towns for a bunch of picks if you're Minnesota. I'm not even saying that will happen, but that's how they're probably thinking about it, right? And then we're back to square one. We have Anthony Edwards, who's really great. Yeah, we gave up a lot for Gobert, but whatever, it is what it is, and we'll start building a different way now. And it is kind of like funny money, fake, crazy Monopoly board stuff here, but I think it's just where we are. I people who are like, wow, the Wolves broke the system and everything needs to get back to normal. Like, I mean, sure, a player like Rudy Gobert might not go for that much, but this exorbitant price tag is not going to change. This is what it's going to be from now on. I don't think that's going anywhere.
Last thing I want to ask you about the Suns before we move on to the rest of this very busy deadline, Brendon. I hit on this a little bit earlier, but I think there are two players on their own pedestal as far as important X factor players in the title chase in regards to their health the next several months between now and in June. It's Chris Paul in the West and it's Chris Middleton in the East. Am I wrong about that?
Chris Paul's health is one thing. I think there were a lot of games earlier this season when he wasn't even playing well when he was on the court. I think that's changed lately. I think, they've been very patient with him in terms of there's been these absences from the Suns where it's like, what is even hurt right now, guy, And so I think that they're playing it patiently. I think that is one of the benefits, though, because KD's a guy like that too, right? You could make the same case for his health, although we don't really think of him as that type of player. He's played like 50 or so games the past 3 seasons. He's on pace to do that again. And I think that you will not see whatever the 5 I just listed off to you was, Chris, when you asked me who the best ones were going to be. I don't feel like we're going to see those 5 starting and finishing a lot of games between now and the playoffs. That might set them up in a bad spot in the standings. Maybe it doesn't matter because even if 2 of those guys are healthy, they're going to win. I don't know. We'll see. But they're going to have to bring Chris and Kevin, I think, both along pretty slowly if they want them to both be 35-plus minutes killing teams for 4 rounds this spring, which obviously is the goal.
Yeah, look, they are in the West is tightly compact at the current moment. They are, they're out of the play-in tournament. They're not like further down like some of these other teams, but like they probably, I would imagine, want to make a push to maybe like if they could somehow get up to 2, that would be like a big win for them. Right now, they're 5th. Same record as Dallas. If you could like get up and be closer to Memphis, and that's also going to matter for them. If you get a more favorable first-round series and maybe avoid Denver till the conference finals, that would be a really big deal for Phoenix. But I do desperately want Phoenix-Denver in the playoffs. Like I desperately want that. Yeah, that.
The one thing I don't want in the West I just in the playoffs in general, like I hate when it's kind of what happened last year with Milwaukee and Boston when it's like those were the 2 best teams. They just beat each other up in like the first or second round, but we all knew what it was. That kind of sucks. I want to see that, but I want to see it in the conference finals. So you're right. It's going to be on the Suns to get to some wins here and make that happen because right now they're sitting up to have it be second round.
All right, let's just do 5 minutes on the Nets, and I just want to ask you: they move on Jay Crowder, but they kept Bridges, they kept like all the other guys they had in house. They kept Dorian Finney-Smith. Surprised it didn't move anybody on?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the move that I would make, Chris, if I'm the Nets next, is to trade, this summer. I mean, not right now. But I'm going to trade Nick Claxton this summer. He has 1 year left on he's on a bargain deal. He's like 2 years, $20 million type of contract that he signed last summer. Trade Dorian Finney-Smith because as much as I think he's a very valuable player, I don't exactly think he's going to get a lot better than what he is, so there's no real need to keep him around and see what improvements he can make. And then Cam Johnson, who they just got back from the Suns, is a restricted free agent this summer, so I'm going to be looking to sign and trade that guy. I do think you probably see what Mikal Bridges can turn into. Maybe you don't trade him right away unless you get a huge offer. But again, back to the mega trade thing, right? They are in position to rebuild on the fly, rebuild in a hurry here. I mean, they don't have that one spectacular asset, but I mean, you trade a 2029 unprotected Suns pick. I think that's going to probably do some nice movement for you. I think that they're off to a good start. And they have the Ben Simmons contract too, which is pretty big, right? So obviously it doesn't have value like we said, but you could still see a situation where they go get a better player who makes a lot and he's just sort of the salary, kind of like we saw with Russell Westbrook with the Lakers this year.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what their price was on like a Royce O'Neal or a DFS to reroute him or some of these guys, because I think those are guys that could have helped other teams more immediately right now. And if I'm them, I'm kind of skewing more towards the actual full-on rebuild than I am like kind of doing like a redux of the Kenny Atkinson era. Is like appealing as that maybe is to some degree. I kind of wonder if like a year where you're pretty actively bad with some of these guys kind of would have made some sense. I'm curious to see what they do next. They get a reset now. They got all those picks back. They obviously they replaced the picks they gave up to Houston, and they get to keep them from other teams out. And they won't be great picks, but like they're at least picks, and you can do some things with that. Curious to just see how this does kind of unfold for them over the next couple of years. They're a team that I'm interested to see how they approach the rest of the year as well, because like.
Yeah,
if they wanted to be, they could be like a really annoying like lower like first round playoff team for someone. But like is that?
Well, why wouldn't they be, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like are they going to buy anybody out? Probably not. Not really any of those guys are the right type of material to be bought out. So, I mean, they have to play them. I think they will be kind of frisky. I'm glad that neither you or I was taking the nerdy approach here, Chris. Of like this is the type of basketball Twitter person that I think I want to I hope Elon bans them, I guess is what I'll say. I'm actually really interested to see Brooklyn basketball Twitter person. Stop. Please stop. You're not interested to watch the Nets. The Nets aren't interested to watch the Nets. Those players won't be on the team in 3 months. It doesn't make you interesting to say you want to watch the Brooklyn Nets. I'm sorry that I did it's just, come on. What are we doing?
I'm going to make a prediction right now. This isn't like it all reported. This just would make a lot of sense to me. They get to June or July, post-draft. Karis LeVert will go to Brooklyn in a sign and trade of some kind. One of those wings will go back to Cleveland. Maybe it's Cam Johnson, who I think would really fit in Cleveland. Maybe it's one of those other guys. And they get the Cavs like 2024 first-round pick. I think that's the kind of thing that's the kind of business they should do in the summer.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they should be trading most of these players, I think, in the summer.
Keep Mikal Bridges, unless you get
get blown away.
Yeah, unless like someone gives you like okay. Let's settle. Here's an NBA Twitter debate that I actually find interesting. Would you have given up more in a vacuum for Mikal or OG? I would have given up more for Mikal.
Me too. I'm glad you didn't leave me high and dry on the criticizing NBA Twitter thing, because
you're right.
It felt like you were gonna put me out like I'm just some jerk being like, I hate NBA Twitter.
I think you're right. They're not going to be fun to watch. They're not going to be fun to watch
because all these guys know they're not going to be there. You know what I mean? But yes, I would pick Mikal. And I think I really just think like if we have this conversation again on August 1st or August 9th, I guess, just to have it be a nice 6 months from now. This is going to look like an even better situation. Do you think Sean Marks is a good GM? Do you think
I don't know, man. I don't know for this. I don't know how to evaluate any of this. This is like one of the most bonkers runs you could possibly go on.
He did. Well, you mentioned the Kenny Atkinson era. He nailed that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Marks
found those guys. He got value at the end of the first round. Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, and whatever. Eventually turns that into multiple different stars. Like, I think he is a guy with this part of the job that can do it. And I don't think he's going to get fired, but we'll see.
Let's move on, though. I don't have much more to say about the Nets. We're going to go now to the Los Angeles Lakers, the real Lakers of Los Angeles, who, Brendon, I thought had a good deadline.
Yeah.
I thought they did. I don't totally love like every little thing about these moves. I think considering they like didn't give up both of their picks and like the one has a protection on it and so there's some insurance there. They move off of Russ, which seemed like I think needed to happen after LeBron broke the scoring record there. And like to be clear, we're not even going to get to talk about LeBron and the scoring record today, but I would like to come back.
We could probably do it at the end.
Yeah,
we could probably. We can't ignore it.
No, it's too important to in just general. It's for history for us not to talk about that. But I like the business they did. I think D'Lo is like he's not great, but like he is competent, will make some threes. That is an improvement over maybe what Russ was providing you with some playmaking. I think Vanderbilt's going to be a solid, good defender for them. Beasley is a shooter that's going to thrive with LeBron. Mo Bamba, I think, has improved. Like, I think the moves they made with sending out Russ, sending out Bev, sending out Thomas Bryant, who asked for a trade. JTA doesn't really play for them. He goes out. Damian Jones goes out. They got better players without giving up the farm of everything just for minor improvements. They are still set up to maybe make another trade in the summer. They have the inside track on maybe keeping D'Lo. You would think that you only get him in part because you want to keep him, and we'll see what that number maybe looks like and how that kind of impacts things. I don't think this makes them a title contender. I don't even know where they're going to really fall in the West hierarchy, but this is a better team than it was before the deadline, and that at least makes for more competitive LeBron-centric basketball down the stretch, which is really all I'm really asking for with LeBron at this point.
I think they did incredible business here, personally. Maybe
are you a sneaky D'Lo guy?
I think he is a better version of the type of player that they've been trying to get, and a little bit of a worse version of Kyrie Irving, right? Which just tracks with what they have thought that they've needed. And I like, let me put it this way, whether it was going to be Kyrie or now it's D'Angelo Russell, I like that player type much, much, much more than I like the player type that is 6'7" ball handler who can neither shoot nor defend at a high level, who costs the minimum because we don't have any assets to get somebody better. That has been the MO of their front office for most of the past few years is, these Juan Toscano Anderson, Lonnie Walker, those types of players who are Lance Stevenson, who are doing nothing to help your team, right? So I like it from that perspective. I think the other reason is the funnier and more interesting part of this trade to me, Chris, which is the fact that Danny Ainge got absolutely smoked in this trade. Ainge was making it well known around the NBA that he wanted a first-round pick for one each from Mike Conley, who also went to Minnesota in this deal, Jared Vanderbilt, and Malik Beasley. He got one total. And yes, it was a fairly valuable first-round pick that he ended up getting, but the Lakers also got off of Russell Westbrook, which everyone was telling us cost a first-round pick alone. So it cost them less to do what they wanted to do, and Danny Ainge got way less than he was expecting to get for his side of it. That feels like a complete W for Rob Pelinka, as much as my mouth just started to come a little bit with some throw-up out of it. I can't help but hand it to him. He did a really good job here. I think, again, yeah, you're right. No. Are they winning the championship because of this trade? No. But was there a move out there that was going to make us say yes to that question? No. So I think they did a very good job. And I think, like you said, with Russell and all the rest of these players, they could be on the team next season too, or they could be traded in the future. So I think this really, really made them a better team. And from a value standpoint, they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I think the value part of it is the way to look at it. Like maybe they go out for Bojan Bogdanovic again in the summer. Maybe the Kyrie thing in Dallas implodes and they go that direction again instead of D'Lo. Like they have flexibility to do something with LeBron in the summer now. And I think like this team will just be better the rest of the way. And I don't know where that's gonna take them. You look at the standings. Like this isn't a team that is, sitting sixth and has a chance to jump to third. Like this is the 13th ranked team in the West. We're talking about a team this team only gets so much attention because it's for two reasons. It's the Lakers and they have LeBron James. That is why. That is why this team gets oxygen. That's why we're talking about them now. They're behind Oklahoma City. They're behind Utah. They're behind Portland, Golden State, Minnesota, and New Orleans to even get up in the play-in race as of right now. So they have an uphill battle. Now, do I like their odds of maybe even though they just got smoked by the Thunder on LeBron's night? Yeah. Do I like
smoked? Be nice. They lost by 4.
Okay, look, that game only got closer late because of some shenanigans, and I watched Josh Giddey just absolutely put Russ in just hell. So what,
Russ, this is the last time we really have to have a deep Russ Lakers conversation. So I think we can at least the way that man was turning the ball over as LeBron was as that ticker in the right-hand corner was getting closer to 0 on TNT and Russ, I think like he made some shots. I'm not going to overdo it.
But he played like a guy.
And the media certainly are overdoing it.
Holy crap! That was something.
Vampire.
Okay.
A vampire. I don't ever even use that word in my life, and apparently Russell Westbrook is one. No, but the way that he was turning the ball over and
he played like a guy. He played like a guy who knew he was getting traded.
Yes, and then he didn't want to check out of the game and blah blah blah. So,
and then
that's kind of the way that I look at it.
Him and Darvin Ham dapped up on the way out of the arena, like thing. I was like, okay, like we've lost the.
Speaking of words that haven't come out of mouths very often, and when Woj put "dapped up" in a tweet, I almost collapsed in my bedroom.
I'm imagining Woj like dapping someone up now, and it's like making me giggle a little bit, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, he's around the NBA. You got to imagine he's fairly practiced, but it was a little bit hilarious to see him.
Is he a handshake guy? I don't know, but like this team is going to probably be a play-in team, or maybe like that's where I imagine this is headed, and like maybe we get Golden State Lakers in the play-in, and it's just Curry and LeBron going at it again
again.
Then they play Denver in round 1 and get smoked. Like that feels like where this ended, but will it be more competitive now? The answer is yes.
Yeah, and I think they'll be more fun to watch. I think they can take a little bit of pressure off of LeBron and AD. Not enough, in my opinion. I think that's one of the quiet aspects of this is like Kyrie. You could have asked less of LeBron and Davis. This trade, you're still asking for, can those guys play 35 minutes and score 30 a night for us to really win the amount of games we need to? And so from that aspect, like not a lot has changed, I think, to kind of agree with you. I think they got a lot better, but did their end-all, be-all, like, future this season really change much? Probably no.
Last thing, where do you have any interest in where Russ could go and be interesting?
I don't know if he's going to help any team.
Yeah.
I sound like a hater, but I mean, what am I supposed to feel optimistic based on?
No, I mean, I think there are things he does that are positive, and I think he's taken. I do generally think he's probably taken like too much guff the last couple of years and has been like a scapegoat for certain things that are not entirely his fault. But is he like a title altering like buyout market guy? The answer is no. Like the Clippers would be kind of funny if he just stays in LA. The Miami thing is kind of like. I kind of want to see Miami just to see what that looks like.
Like, I don't think he's the type of player that needs to be ripped to shreds, which is why I was kind of laughing at the lengths that the media people are going to right
now. He's a vampire.
Vampire.
He's an Anne Rice character.
Yeah. But I don't think, like, he turns the ball over a ton. He doesn't make threes. He doesn't play defense. Like, if you're talking about a winning team, being on a winning team, I'm not really sure what role he's going to play that's going to make them better. So that sucks, but it is what it is.
Yes. All right, let's move on. Top of the West. Speaking of, let's talk about the good teams in the West, the teams that are actually really, really good right now. All of them, top 3 teams make some moves. You have the Grizzlies getting Luke Kennard. Danny Green goes out in a deal. The Clippers add Eric Gordon, Bones Highland, and Mason Plumlee. Kennard goes out. Reggie Jackson goes out. Reggie Jackson on the buyout market. John Wall back to Houston in a 3-team deal, but will be waived and bought out and will be available to some team, I guess. Denver Nuggets add Thomas Bryant. Bones Highland goes. Davon Reed goes. You also should add that the Warriors basically, like via like some rerouting of players and things, and the bringing back Gary Payton Jr., James Wiseman is now a Detroit Piston where they have like a bunch of centers. Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart. Like there's a lot going on in Detroit right now. And they traded 5 second-round picks, which was a theme of the day of just second-round picks going everywhere. So, Brendon, what
5, yeah.
Just everywhere. Brendon, so when you look at these moves, when you look at what the Clippers did, you look at what the Nuggets did, like the Warriors, like whatever move you want to hit on, do any of these you want to start with first as maybe being the one you feel like could be the most impactful when it comes to deadline time or it comes to playoff time, the rest of the season time?
Most impactful to me is going to be what Memphis did getting Luke Kennard. we did a show after Kyrie got traded at the very end talking about the 5 everyone should want them trade deadline all-stars. And one of the biggest ones that I felt like wasn't getting talked about enough that I had on my list was Luke Kennard, because look, this guy, just all that he does is make three-pointers. He's 6'5". He can handle the ball. Is he a great defender? No. Is he a good shooter? Yeah, he's one of the best ones in the NBA, and I trust him to make good decisions with the ball in his hands. Like, I just look at what Memphis has done, where they've liked in the playoffs especially to have Tyus Jones on the court with Ja Morant. They have a guy in Desmond Bane with the strength and length to be a decent, versatile defender on the wing. I feel like you could easily see Kennard be maybe not a closing player every night, but I could see lineups where Ja, Kennard, Bane, Jaren Jackson, and Steven Adams are all out there together, and that was the biggest need they had, was can they get another versatile shooter to play with their best players and make them better in the half court, especially offensively. And Kennard does all of those things, and it didn't really cost a ton for them to go get him. Danny Green wasn't going to play much on this team, and they got a better player out of it.
I think that's a good shout. I like the Kennard pickup. I don't know if it totally changes my feelings on how good Memphis could totally be in the West, but I think my theme on all of these deals, Brendon, is that I don't think any of these trades are like I don't feel like any of the teams in the East, at the top of the East, we'll talk about next, like made trades that I think absolutely like changed their trajectory, or like the only one that really did was the Nets, and that's because they're going to take a step back to some degree, right? I don't think any of the trades, aside from Phoenix, none of those trades are like really altering. I find the Clippers move sort of interesting because I think number one, Eric Gordon, Norm Powell are kind of like redundant to me. So I'm curious about what that kind of looks like. Bones Highland is like an interesting backup point guard choice, considering like they went for John Wall, who was like very much like a pass guy. They were linked to Fred. They were linked to Mike Conley. Like they were linked to these guys that were defense and passing and like kind of more game management. This is like a wild card kind of factor. A ton of upside, obviously a very young player. On-off numbers in Denver are pretty bad. Matt Moore, shouts to at HP Basketball on Twitter, had tweeted something about like his on-off numbers. I went and looked at them and was like, oh, he had
the
really
worst
bad.
net rating on the Nuggets.
Absolutely bad. And like that's a bit of a red flag to some degree, but like, you know, you're betting on the upside. Maybe like that tells you what they think of my boy Jason Preston. Unfortunate. Hashtag free Jason Preston. Let's get him some minutes somewhere. But like, and I like the Mason Plumlee pickup to give them an alternative to Zubac, who's had like some really up and down games of late. They just needed another center because Moses Brown was their backup and he was on a 2-way deal. So like, had to get another center at some point, and Plumlee's a good backup option. But like those moves don't move me. The Thomas Bryant move in Denver is interesting. It gives them a backup center I like more than DeAndre Jordan. But like they got second round picks for Bones. They don't get a wing in any way. Like they don't get the wing they're reportedly kind of looking for. So like I don't really know if I feel differently about what their roster construction is.
This is my question about the Clippers. Do you think they got anybody at this deadline who will be in there? Tell me a game 5 must-win first-round playoff game against, I don't even care who, although I know the matchup does affect some of it. Do any of these players play, in your opinion, from who they got? Because I'm not sure.
In crunch time, no. I don't think so.
Well, not even crunch time. I'm wondering genuinely, because you mentioned the overlap with Gordon and Kennard. I understand Plumlee is maybe the most likely.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking, though, in the playoffs in 2021, which they faced the Suns, I saw them up close and personal in that run. Their backup center, I understand it wasn't ideal, but they made do and they played well, won big games with Nicholas Batum and Marcus Morris being their backup centers. They go small. Ty Lue wants to go small. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure they got anybody who affects how I feel about them in the playoffs against, in a must-win game against the best teams. I'm not sure any of these guys play because you can hack Plumlee, you can abuse him at the rim. He's just not a very special player by any means. It's Mason Plumlee. I just don't know if this affected anything outside of Highland being like a trade chip down the line. I don't know if they really did much at all for me.
No, I agree with that. I don't think they did anything that is like changing. This is still a team very much dependent on Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. That is where this team is at. They maybe got some moves, did some things that I like, and like I kind of get why they did some of the things, and maybe like we'll talk about Toronto, and like Toronto just doesn't do anything, and maybe like they couldn't just get Fred, who I think would have been a really great fit with them, but this team is kind of, I feel very much the same about them, even with just a little better depth. Maybe it's still very much the same team. How do you feel about the Denver thing of this, where they get Thomas Bryant? I think him and Zeke Naji can be like a good backup center pairing option. I still just feel like a wing would have been better. Maybe they're in the Danny Green market. Maybe they're in the Reggie Jackson market if they want to replace Bones as a backup point guard. I think both those things can make sense for them if they go that route. But what do you make of their deadline moves?
I think this Bones Highland thing is super interesting. Bones Highland, apparently, according to Mike Singer at the Denver Post, he, on January 22nd, left the Nuggets bench a few minutes into the fourth quarter of a game, and it basically seems like it went all downhill after that point. This is kind of the expose that comes after a guy like this gets traded.
Yeah, when all the facts that you kind of have like all can get confirmed because they're willing to like put them out there at that point. Yeah,
he gets traded for 2 second-round picks today, and it says in this article, numerous veterans were frustrated with Highland in the aftermath of the decision to walk off the bench. Another veteran spoke about how he was displeased and understood why Bones was being shopped. And the craziest thing is it says the Nuggets tried to keep the fact that Highland was available quiet, but other teams had already heard about this incident and the way that he was falling out with the team. And it sounds like just no one in the NBA wanted this guy. Like it got so ugly that not only was Denver out on him, but the rest of the league was like, this is a toxic player. It's just crazy how quickly things changed, where preseason it's like, watch out for Bones Highland. Denver really has something on their hands if he can play off Jokic and fit into this system, to no one in the NBA wants this player, and he's going to the Clippers, who don't even need him, for 2 second-round picks. That's it. It's really crazy, and a big miss for Denver. I mean, I'm not blaming it on them, but they've done such a good job drafting and developing talent and keeping them and getting good value and all that stuff. This one just fell away from them.
Yeah, and like it was interesting to see the Michael Porter Jr. comments where he pretty much like came out and defended Bones and was very much like in support of Bones, which was, kind of maybe goes in contrast to maybe how the organization felt, which is in itself is
I think MPJ probably can relate to the to the things Bones is going through, having been on the wrong side of Mike Malone himself in the past.
I love Mike Malone. He called a rage timeout the other night when they were up by like 12, and I was like, Mike, you're my kind of guy. Just getting really annoyed over like really little things. This is like my grumpy the Goldman.
He's a very old-fashioned coach for sure.
Kind of love it, but I know it's not everyone's taste, but it's kind of it. Let's end this West stuff really quick on the Warriors. This tells you so much about what they think of James Wiseman that they're just like, we're going to dump him, we're going to save a bunch of money, and we're going to bring back Gary Payton II, and let's just try to run this band back together with him under contract for a couple of years longer. Also makes the Jordan Poole, Gary Payton II jersey swap from the other night extremely funny, considering now they're teammates again, which is like just kind of funny to me. But
I think jersey swaps by like the sixth players on teams is always pretty funny. It's a little bit silly. It's like, it's cool, you're friends, but like I don't know why you need the jersey.
If you could,
I'm being a hater. It's okay.
If you were like the 14th or 15th guy in an NBA team, or like a two-way guy, and you were trying to jersey swap with a player who's like a random NBA player you'd want to jersey swap with, I have two that come to mind immediately for me personally.
I personally would want to do a jersey swap with Marcus Howard, although he's not in the NBA anymore because he went to my high school.
Okay.
Jalen Williams from the Thunder also went to my high school, so I guess he would be the newest replacement. The better one, the bigger one with no Y. Okay. Yeah, so he'd be my answer for now because he's repping Perry High where Marcus Howard wasn't able to.
Okay, I would go Robin Lopez. Guy makes me laugh.
All right.
Did you see his tweet the other day about Muppets leaving New York? Did you see this tweet?
I did.
I love Robin Lopez.
I love Robin Lopez. He started his career here.
He shows up.
He's a son's lifer. He's a once a son, always a son. I love him.
He shows up wearing like shorts and like a Seattle Mariners hat like every day when like everyone else is like dressed like very much playing up the fashion. He's just like, I look like a guy you probably see at Trader Joe's, and I love that about Robin Lopez.
He's like that guy in a movie or a TV show that like gets one scene in the pilot, and then later on you find out like he's funding an entire operation and has like $100 million net worth, and you never expected it. That's Robin Lopez.
Yeah. Other one, obviously.
Who's your other guy?
I mean, come on, it's Jason Preston at the Ohio University. I gotta get when I'm gonna get one Bobcat every like 15 years in the NBA. I gotta go out and get it. But those are mine. Let's just see let's just see how healthy Steph is, and then we'll see if this trade like means anything for the Warriors' title chances.
Yeah, I would have preferred for them to get a shooter if they were only going to have their one move, which is why we had talked about Olynyk or something like that. I'm not really sure if Olynyk was ever available. You kind of stopped hearing his name. I don't know. Maybe they just Utah likes him. That's fine. Yeah. But I think Gary Payton, like he's a better version of his archetype, but it kind of felt like they were getting some of that from Dante DiVincenzo this season, whereas they haven't really filled the Otto Porter slot from their championship rotation. So I would have liked them to try to fill that slot more than getting the Gary Payton slot or literally Gary Payton like they did. But look, I mean, again, it's going to rise and fall with Steph and how much their role players can kind of come together like they did last year. A lot of that is TBD.
Let's see what happens with Kuminga next couple of months. He will be interesting to watch. Let's move on to the East, Brendon. Mostly pretty pat at the top. Obviously,
yeah.
We see some moves. Boston adds Mike Muscala. The Bucks add Jay Crowder. And I think notably get rid of Ibaka, George Hill, and Jordan Nwora. Maybe clearing the room for some buyout guys. That would seemingly be what you're looking for there for Milwaukee if you're going to clear out a couple guys there. Philly ducks the tax. They trade Jalen McDaniels. Matisse Thybulle goes to Portland. Furkan Korkmaz, who did have a trade demand, by the way, did not get traded. So unfortunate for Furkan Korkmaz, whose trade demand just got lost to the wind. And then otherwise in the East, Toronto adds Jakob Poeltl. Thad Young gets traded. They don't make a single. OG Anunoby doesn't get traded. Fred VanVleet doesn't get traded. Gary Trent Jr., who is on a function out of expiring, does not get traded. Pretty kind of like interesting kind of whole, like some moves on the edges. The Crowder thing was like signaled forever with the Bucks. Like they've been on him for a long time. The Sixers thing, I like that move with McDaniels. Interesting, Cleveland doesn't make any moves. We can talk about that. I kind of want to hear your take on that, but interesting times in the East. I feel like the biggest thing is that Kevin Durant is no longer in the East. To bring this full circle,
yeah.
Kevin Durant is no longer in the East. Kevin Durant not being in the East means that like there's probably one less team competing for the top four in the East. So there are 4 teams in the East I think should be expecting to be the top 4. 3 of them make moves. 1 of them does not. We'll see who maybe ends up 5. We'll see if anyone can end up pushing. But Miami doesn't make moves either. Like, it feels like we have a top 4 in the East by virtue of the Nets trading Kevin Durant away. And Kyrie Irving, too, to be fair.
Both of them, yeah. Although, if they kept Kyrie and not KD, I'm not sure we would feel like they were a juggernaut.
Sure, but it's like Spencer Dinwiddie's not as good at basketball as Kyrie, and like that's just
I get your point. It's just funny to imagine. It's just funny. I guess I just don't know if Kyrie has really earned the we can't forget him comment. But I get what you're saying. I think this is about the Raptors, right? I mean,
okay.
The takeaway from the East in the trade deadline to me was what Toronto did not do, and the fact that they were not sellers. And I think Chicago probably gets lumped in there also, although they were not as expected to be sellers. Here's the thing. So I think with Toronto, it's like they can probably find a way to sign and trade Fred VanVleet this summer, potentially, because you could imagine VanVleet being more valuable to a winning championship team that would need to do a sign and trade rather than a team with cap space, more so than a bad team. Why would VanVleet need to go to a bad team? Gary Trent, I'm not so sure. I guess he could opt into his contract potentially. Maybe they have some feelers out that that's what they're going to do, although he's a clutch client. They don't tend to do that. They don't tend to do the team-friendly thing. Maybe they extend Gary Trent between now and the draft. Guess that's a possibility. He's not the worst thing ever to lose. Maybe they were never going to get something big. Like, this is all me trying to give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit. OG Anunoby can be figured out this summer or next deadline. But I guess, like, as much as I can say all of that, and I can see the reasoning, was adding Pirtle and losing in the first round again, which I think would be all of our expectation. Is the benefit of that any better than what they gain from maybe some different moves down the line? Like, I just feel like at a certain point, you got to cut bait with what you got. These guys aren't going to be on your team long term. You get rid of them, you take what you can get, and you move on. I don't know why they didn't just do what every other team would have done, and especially when you throw in adding Pirtle to the mix, who they probably want to re-sign now.
Yes,
it feels like they got closer to being in the middle. Like they reaffirmed being in the middle, which is not what any NBA team should do.
Well, and it's like you get Pirtle, who is going to be a free agent. You're probably going to re-sign him if you gave up a protected first for him. Like that seemingly would be the plan. And are we even sure that he is like the right center fit with Scotty and with Pascal? Are we sure that that is like the right center next to two guys? One guy who's like an all right shooter, and one guy in Scotty Barnes who is not totally like figured out how to shoot. Like, is that the right way if you're kind of pivoting to that version of your team? I don't totally know if I buy what that looks like. I like Pirtle a lot. I think he's a good player. I think he would help a lot of teams. He could start at center for a lot of teams. But Siakam's shooting is a 32.8% career three-point shooter on 3.1 per game. That is not his game. Barnes is under 30% this year. Okay? Like, these are not guys that are going to space around your center who doesn't shoot threes and also can't make free throws. Maybe Scotty figures it out, but it hasn't happened yet. You have, like, so, like, you're cramping the spacing, and I get there's a need at center there. I just don't totally get it. And then, like, the worst thing, Brendon, I think they could do here is just like run this back and do that. If they do that, then I'm even more confused by what they did here. And it seems like they had offers on the table for OG. All the reporting makes it seem like they had offers from the Knicks and the Grizzlies and teams and the Warriors had some interest. I think we'll talk about that at the end, but like maybe they'll move on from him in the summer, but it seems like they had deals for OG right now, and I would like to know in some detail what those were before I kind of like totally just look at this weird, but it feels like maybe this was the time to do some kind of pivoting, and they just kind of maybe this doesn't matter in 6 months if they do kind of what we've talked about with the sign and trade with these guys and OG gets flipped, but I don't totally get what's going on there.
All of that I agree with for the most part. I think it's kind of connected to what we just talked about in the West because it seems like the Clippers were the number one suitor for Van Vliet and they went a different direction. They didn't seem, Zach Lowe had it like right after the deadline on ESPN that the Clippers never seemed to want Terrence Mann to be involved. They were never offering Terrence Mann, whereas the Raptors probably wanted him. I think that's smart for the Clippers because I'm a big Terrence Mann believer.
Yeah, good player.
I think he does things for you that Van Vliet very much does not, even though they don't necessarily have anybody that does what Van Vliet does. I think Mann's stuff is more valuable if you're just saying, what do I need to get to win a championship? I think the versatile defense, rim attacking, everything else that Mann does, I think it's correct of them to keep him. So maybe there wasn't like a major bidding war for Van Vliet like we thought. The Suns were apparently in on him. That obviously wasn't going to happen once they got Kevin Durant. I just think... And the offense stuff, you're totally right. I mean, I think defensively, that's what this move was. It's doubling down on let's be an amazing defense in Toronto and see if we can, push Boston or Milwaukee in the first round. I guess I just come down on it where the upside to making a playoff push. A lot of the time when we see teams just say, you know what, fine, like let's just go for it in the first round and see what happens. Those are the teams that are doing it for the first time. Outside of Scotty Barnes, I'm not really sure what playoff experience, quote unquote, does for the Toronto Raptors. Who's benefiting from that in a major way on this roster that hasn't experienced it or is going to see something new? Like, are they just doing this so Scotty can taste 4 playoff games or 6 playoff games? Because that feels a little silly to me too, and he already did it last year, right? So it's not even his first time. I don't know what the benefit of that is. Like another team might see that benefit. Because there's a lot of franchises I would look at and say, like Minnesota last year. I think that experience was incredible for Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns and everybody on that roster. Raptors aren't like that.
Memphis before that, it's another one where I think it really helped them.
Losing to the Jazz, it was a good experience, right? I don't know what that is for Toronto.
Last thing we'll ask about this group of these. What do you just make of the Cavs not doing anything? keeping Karis LeVert, signaling that they maybe want to re-sign him and kind of rolling with what they have?
I'm not a huge LeVert fan, so with that part of it, I don't know.
Me either.
I think it's good to keep as much ball handling on the roster as you can. Like if you're gonna re-sign a type of player that maybe you still don't fully plan on keeping forever, I think a person who can do stuff with the ball in his hands is a good place to go. I think in general, I don't mind them standing pat because I just think this is their first go-round. They're in no rush. They don't necessarily fully 100% know what this team is going to be at its best yet. So they didn't get that opportunity last year, right? Like we were just talking about with these teams that get the first taste. This is kind of it for them, even though they're still going to be a good high seed. They're going to be favored in the first round, but it'll still be their first time. So I think from that perspective, I don't mind just kind of seeing what happens, and then maybe you can have a more clear-headed evaluation. But there were just some players I think they could have gotten for pretty cheap anyway that wouldn't have changed too much that might have helped them. So I don't know. But if it was going to cost LeVert and you think that's going to be a better asset down the line on a new contract, then I don't hate it.
I'll have more on this on Locked On Cavs, and it's not worth like super belaboring because it's not the most interesting thing that happened today. But I do think that they would be better this season if they could be able to turn Karis LeVert into like Royce O'Neal. But what was the cost? Like, was that all of the seconds they have? They can't trade a first right now. There's information I don't think I have at least that tells me maybe what is going on behind the scenes there in terms of like what was gettable for LeVert plus like a bunch of seconds, or like Jetty Osman and Dylan Windler plus a bunch of seconds. And they do have an open roster spot. Maybe there's a buyout guy that they'll chase, but they're probably not anyone's first choice in the buyout market either.
No, maybe not. But if you're offering legitimate playing time, I think that tends to. There's always wild card candidates who end up on worse teams than we think, just because there's an actual role for them rather than coming in. Hey, you want to be the 11th man on the Suns? Like, no, I'm good. I actually want to play. I think the other part of it is when it comes to the Nets guys, who I think a lot of the league would have wanted. I just think it's pretty hard to pivot when you're not sure you're going to trade Kevin Durant to suddenly you have like 8 guys on your roster and you haven't had any conversations about them, you know? Like we laugh about how the deadline creates action and all these teams finally get around to making these moves the minute a deadline hits, but it's like they've been talking, right? They have a general idea of what's out there, but do you think the Nets had a general idea what would have been out there for like Cam Johnson? You know, no. So I think that probably affected some of these teams who would have been looking at Brooklyn's guys specifically, or even some of the other players around the league who we maybe thought were going to be available. Toronto not selling, like all these dominoes start to combine. And so I guess I don't criticize any team too much who didn't make a move that would have been expected to, because I do think this is still wide open and there's only so many trades that are realistically going to happen when it's human beings talking to each other about stuff. Like that sounds silly, but it's true.
No, I think that's absolutely accurate. Brendon, let's just end on some small notes, some lingering questions, some loose ends. So 2 rumors that don't materialize. Zach LaVine to the Knicks, OG Anunoby to the Golden State Warriors. Either of those particularly pique your interest?
I think they both, the reason I threw them both up there is they both feel like things that could be revisited in the future, because those were both players that didn't get dealt at all. LaVine still on the Bulls. I would be avoiding that at all costs, just with his injury history and age and everything else. 5 years, $200+ million left on that contract. I think that would have been a mistake for the Knicks. OG Anunoby would have been a cheat code for the Warriors. I'm absolutely glad that did not happen, as somebody who is going to make no attempt to hide his son's affiliation for the rest of time. I've done this podcast in Phoenix for years, and I didn't lean in too hard into the fandom, but this year I will take that. So OG Anunoby to the Warriors would have bummed me out, because that would have been an amazing fit for them. But it still could happen. Like I just said, they have the GP2 salary still. They have Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. That's probably what the package was going to be this year. Wiseman and those other 2 young guys and some other stuff. So they could easily still be on the OG Anunoby list. What do you think? Did either of those feel like real to you? Likely?
OG makes a lot of sense as a potential Warriors target in the summer. I agree there. I would have absolutely died laughing if Quentin Grimes would have been in a Zach LaVine trade and not a Donovan Mitchell trade. It's
fair. You're allowed to be a troll about that. I can't take that from you.
Let me trade.
A very silly thing that the Knicks did, and they deserve to be clowned for it.
Let's like trade for the worst player and give up the player we didn't give up for the better player. And also, this guy has like a severe injury concerns. And that Levine stuff kind of popped up out of nowhere. You're curious to see if he moves in the summer, and then what that price will be considering the injury stuff and how much money he's owed. That is one.
I kind of thought he made sense for Dallas if they hadn't gone for Kyrie. Like, that's one of the only teams where I was like, okay, they have some versatile defensive pieces. Luka's going to be the main guy, so really you're talking about Levine as like a killer shooter and attacker off, a second side action. But that's not an option anymore. I don't know I don't know if I could find a place for Levine that I would feel really awesome about. That's just a huge risk.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that. That's a weird one. Of the buyout guys, I'm most
the Bulls
curious
are sad.
Well, did you see this latest Lonzo Ball update?
Yeah, that's like a genuine bummer.
So yeah, for people that haven't seen this, this is from Will Gottlieb, who covers the team for Chicago sports. I don't know how to actually. It's CHGO.
CHGO. Yeah.
That just feels weird to say it that way. I don't know, but shout out to Will. Arturas Karnisovas was asked if Lonzo will return. He said, "I don't know." What?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the thing Lonzo said that I think, and Billy Donovan talked about it too. That it's like they don't know what's wrong.
Oh, that. But then, like 20 minutes ago, Karnisovas is doing his media and said, "I don't know if he will return." And I'm just like, okay, like
yeah, it's just you're talking about like human physical ailments at that point, right? Not even like athlete physical ailments. Like you're at the point with Ball where it's like walking is gonna hurt, and that just like it sucks.
It's utterly a massive bummer about Lonzo, who's like a very fun player. Really was important to that team when they were working out, and now he's just like broken, I guess. So that's unfortunate. Let's end on this. Let's end on this. Where should Danny Green go? If you could pick, you could tell him where to go. Where should he go?
It's like T-ball. You just put it on. I'm like a 5-year-old with a plastic bat, and he should come to Phoenix. The sports capital of the world this week with the Super Bowl and the Waste Management Phoenix Open and Kevin Durant all just descending upon the Valley of the Sun. He should come be the 5th starter for the Phoenix Suns and win his 58th ring or whatever Danny Green has. That would be my vote, and I will never change my mind until he ends up in like Lord knows where. I think what's his name? Reggie Jackson is playing for the Hornets is what it looks like. So these guys make weird decisions. I'm prepared for anything, but I would pick the Suns if I were him.
Well, Reggie Jackson, I think, didn't he get traded to the Hornets and is getting waived? Isn't that what's happening there?
No, I think he's signing with the Hornets. I think that Shams had it that he's going to choose the Hornets.
Okay, well, good for him. Just go play, I guess. That's also a weird, sad team. Phoenix would be a good one. To me, it's Phoenix or Denver, I think would really make sense for Danny Green. Go chase a ring. Be a team. Go fill a need. The teams that could use a wing, that could eat some shooting. I'm sure Mike Malone would love to have that veteran presence. Danny Green off of KD would make a ton of sense. So I'm in agreement with you that Phoenix would make a ton of sense. Curious to see just kind of what else does happen. If anyone else notable comes by, Kevin Love was kind of put out there as maybe a buyout guy. Kobe Altman did shut that down. I would have liked Kevin Love in Phoenix, to be honest with you. That would have been kind of fun.
So would James Jones.
They are buds, and like Kevin just like providing shooting in little spurts would have been fun, I think.
Yeah, you're right about Reggie Jackson, by the way. I misread that. So I'm less confused about his decision now. We'll see where he ends up. But these guys do go to weird places. They sometimes will just go to like 500 teams because they want to play 20 minutes. So yeah. I don't think Danny Green will do that because he is firmly in the ring chase portion of his career. But there's always some curveballs. You think that you're creating the next championship team, and then all of a sudden someone's like, nah, the Pistons.
Just go.
You never know.
Maybe one of these guys will just go take all the money the Spurs have because they're still under the floor, and just take all of the money. And just take all of that money.
Like $10 million. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, not bad work. Go get some cardio in. Hey, get to tell Greg Popovich stories to say, hey, I got to play for Pop. Could do worse.
Sure. Be a glorified coach. Learn from the best. Pretty bad place to spend 3 months, but it's fine. It's only 3 months.
All right, Brendon, let's end on one final thing. I want to go back to Durant and end on him because I feel like he's the most important thing that happened today by a wide margin.
What team does he play for now, by the way?
The Phoenix Suns, the team you primarily cover.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, but if you had to say like where the Suns rank on your like confidence they'll make the finals list, either combined conferences, so like they could win the finals, where are they on your like ranking of like contenders and your confidence go right now?
Yeah, I think, let me see this.
I can go
kind
first
of agreed with
while you think.
I kind of agreed with what the odds were. You can go first. I kind of agreed with what the odds were when I was looking at it this morning. It felt pretty right to me. Championship odds at FanDuel: Celtics plus 260, Bucks plus 390, Suns plus 480, and then Nuggets plus 750. I don't know if I see that big of a difference between Phoenix and Denver, although if you're talking about the playoffs and everybody's on an equal footing, you probably have to because the talent's just that different. But I feel like the Suns are right there. I think the West is probably a little tougher, so that's why they're behind the Celtics and Bucks, but I think that they're probably number one in the West if I'm just putting money down and saying who do I feel the best about to win 4 playoff rounds.
I think they are probably my 3 or my 4. I would say it's like Boston is 1, and then I think I have Denver 2, and then I either have Phoenix 3 or Milwaukee 3. That's where I would be right now. Those are my 4, and then I would have like probably Philly 5 right now.
Clippers are 5th at FanDuel, plus 1,200.
Yeah, looking
Sixers
at that.
plus 13.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Clippers still just give me a little bit of hesitant. I'm a little hesitant. There.
It's understandable. I think the odds tend to favor the like superstar power of each team a lot because that is, I guess, what matters when it comes to playoff time. But you got to get there first. So I get you on the Clippers.
Interesting that Brooklyn has the same odds as the Kings, which was disrespectful to the Sacramento Kings. But that's
it really does.
Which okay, good. I get maybe that's just betting markets at that certain point. It's just like none of these teams
it's
really
not
have a chance.
fun to bet on Sacramento. It's definitely not going to be getting some action by the average fan.
Light the freaking beam. That, though, is going to do it for this episode of the Just Basketball Show. I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. Jam-packed trade deadline show. What a time to be alive. We'll talk about LeBron in the next show. I promise I want to talk about the legacy of LeBron James. We'll get to it then. It's unfortunate the trade deadline and our busy schedules kind of kept us from diving into that today. But, hey, so much to talk about with Durant. So much to talk about with 28 of 30 teams making trades. It's a trades league now. Brennan's right absolutely about that. Again, follow and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. 5-star reviews only. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Just Basketball Fans. Just People Fans on TikTok. Just Basketball Show on Instagram. Find us on Twitter. And again, use the code JustGridiron. Support the Just Sports family over at Prize Picks. It's really fun. Peter Appel. Shout out to Peter. Does great stuff on Twitter. You can find his Twitter at Peter Appel. And you can check all the stuff out there. But I'm Chris. That's Brendon. Back at it early next week. Thanks for tuning in.